Kevin's somebody we'd consider. Kevin is fantastic.
Kevin is very talented, but I don't know if it's going to be him, but he's a very talented guy.
Kevin is much more interested than most people, by the way, in the balance sheet.
Well, in honor of Tesla earnings and the latest Epstein news, you can go to meetkevin.com and use coupon code RELEASETHEFILES to get the alpha report and my trade alerts every day before the market opens, so you're prepped. All right, here's a recap of what was just said on the Tesla earnings call. We went from up 50 basis points to down 4.5. We are at the very moment losing the 318 line, critical line. Remember, before earnings, we were in no man's land, so it was either up or down. The goal was to go up on talk of new models, especially after the UBS rumor that there was going to be a Model Q getting released, at least for the Chinese market. Unfortunately, we got way more caution from the Tesla executives than we would have bargained for or hoped for. Not great. Okay, so let's talk about some of these details. First, I'm going to focus on some of the nitty gritty. We heard that the delay now in a potential more affordable model is to avoid the complexity of other models, to avoid reducing the margin or competing against their own other products. So in other words, cannibalization. And they want to make sure that they produce as many of these as they can now because of that EV tax credit. So basically, they give 3 reasons why they're delaying an affordable model right now. 1, complexity. 2, not cannibalizing their current vehicles. And number 3, they want to print as many vehicles as possible now because they want people to be able to take advantage of the tax credit, where they're like, hey, by the way, buy a Tesla because if you place your order after late August, you might not be eligible to get the tax credit anymore because we might not be able to deliver before September 30th when the tax credits expire. So they kind of turned it into this weird, like, yeah, let's sell what we have now. That's how our affordable models are going. And people are like, huh? The stock market didn't like that. We saw a little bit of a sell down as soon as they started talking about that. Then we got a little bit of a sell down when Elon was talking about retooling Optimus. He was asked about what's Optimus doing, and Elon said, well, started talking about Optimus, started talking about how basically they need to retool Tesla, that like its design is fundamentally good, but they're gonna have to make a V3 prototype. And hopefully they can make that V3 prototype by the end of the year, and then they could scale it next year. Which, remember, earlier or late last year and early this year, they're like, oh yeah, we'll scale V2 this year because it's great. And now they're like, it's fine. And when it came to like, what does it actually do? The only thing we heard was that Optimus is walking around the office in Palo Alto, which wasn't great either, right? Like, people are looking for some juice here. And again, that's why I think we saw some of these red candlesticks come in. So I'm just trying to align. Like, I made little notes, like, when were the red candlesticks coming? The first red candlestick was, when our CFO comes on and starts talking about the impacts of the big beautiful bill. And then of course we got a red candlestick on Optimus by the end of the year. But then we also got a red candlestick when Elon says he wants to, he's working on a new master plan for Tesla. And I think that got people scratching their heads a little bit, where they're like, wait, what do you mean a new master plan? Is there something wrong with the other master plans that we've been working on? So that was something that came up. There was also this talk about the cost of tariffs being $300 million and specifically hitting the battery division. Both Elon Musk and the CFO framed robotaxi as kind of a way to sell supervised FSD. Like, oh, the more people want to use robotaxi, the more they want a car with supervised FSD. And it was kind of weird because it was sort of like they didn't really want to commit to like talking about the economics of robotaxi, though we did get some numbers on that. We'll talk about that in just a moment. They instead were like, hey, the cars people are using for robotaxi now are kind of like, the cars you could buy. So it's a great way to sell FSD, which I think is true. Then they get asked about the Cybercab, and they basically talk about how the Cybercab will be cheaper because it won't need the acceleration or the turning, capabilities. It won't need the high-speed tires. It could use lower-speed tires. It could use lower-speed brakes and components, basically, because it's supposed to be more of a stable ride anyway. This is where Elon thinks you can get the cost per mile under 30 cents, maybe even under 25 cents, which that was great. But now the question is, what are the revenue economics? Most people take the Cathie Woodian argument and go, oh, 50 cents per mile, that's 50% gross margin. But I think that's a stretch, given that you really need to assume that your pool of robotaxi, riders expands in place of, Uber or Lyft, or that massive competition in the space doesn't compress that. Because if you're operating at a 10% margin, a 30 cent versus a 27 cent or 28 cent or whatever, is it worth it, right? That's the big question. So some weird things here. So we got vagueness on the affordable models. Again, UBS leaks this Model Q for China, but the leadership was really sort of vague on new models here. Again, focusing on avoiding complexity and don't want to have margin compression and don't want to cannibalize. And, we're going to focus on the credit expiration. Oh, by the way, we have $300 million in increased tariff costs. But buy now, because otherwise we can't guarantee delivery. That was interesting. Elon Musk briefly talks about the 13% control that he has still being a little bit of an issue, because he thinks that activists are going to take over and kick him out after he builds an army of robots, and he thinks that'll be bad for humanity. He also forecasts that we're in this weird transition period where we'll lose these incentives. This is actually something that I mentioned earlier, that we're sort of in this lull of Tesla now. And the reasons we're in this lull right now are because we're losing the ZEV credits July 4th. We're losing the $7,500 EV tax credit September 30th. We're losing the 4K used tax credits September 30th. We're losing the home energy tax credits at the end of the year. We just took a benefit of $320 million for a crypto valuation adjustment, which helped us have free cash flow, which otherwise we would have been negative. Right? And then the upsides on things like no politics and a Model 2 or Q. I mean, politics, great, no politics, but the Model 2 Q talk was really weak. It really wasn't exciting, right? Obviously, they're like, hey, this isn't the place for product announcements, but we also don't have anything on the calendar for real product announcements. And we're not using cybercabs on the road right now. Now, we're using regular Model Ys. Now, there was this talk about potentially us being able to submit our cars to a robotaxi network next year. I think that's a total Elon line right there. I don't think that's realistic whatsoever, but he did say it. And he did also say, which I think is realistic and honest and fair, he says that we're probably going to see a few rough quarters. He says, could we have a few rough quarters? Yeah, we could, probably. Q4, Q1, maybe even Q2. We need to scale. Now, he doesn't talk about exactly scale what, but the assumption here is we need to scale robotaxi and Optimus. And then he says, I'd be surprised if Tesla's economics are not compelling next year. So, in other words, could the next 3 quarters suck? Yes. And he said that before, and so I think it's honest. I remember him saying that back in 22, and yeah, you had a couple years that were, pretty rough there. So I don't think he's wrong about that. I think they're realistic here. So unfortunately, I think you've got a delay in the affordable models, which is a near-term oopsies. You've got a delay in Optimus because you're kind of like, hey, we have to make everything new. The gearbox, the sensors, the motors. Remember how I've been talking about like the overheating issue with motors when these Optimus robots or robots in general pick up heavy boxes over and over again 24/7? Like, eventually those joints start overheating a little bit, right? So that's a problem. This requires not only getting new motors or inventing new motors, but then actually proving that those work. And then, of course, you get this talk about a new master plan. It's kind of like, the call seemed very, how should I put it? The call seemed very, I don't want to use the word defeated, but it seemed definitely low energy. And it just seemed, it didn't seem like a usual Elon call. It seemed like today, like, I don't know if he's off the ketamine or what, but like, get where's that happy party Elon? He wasn't here today. And who knows, maybe that's a good thing, because then we got like a more realistic Elon. But that is something that I noticed that was a little bit different. So let's see here. I'm going to look at what some of y'all say in the chat here. Tesla won't be making enough money to keep up or compete. Waymo was smoking them in self-driving. I don't know. I mean, that's an opinion that's out there. You know, I'm excited about the scale that they can achieve without relying on LiDAR and mapping. I'm pretty excited about that. Lil says, hey, Kev, I'm Mikey's neighbor. We do content with your older... Let's go! That's freaking awesome. Good for you. What up? That car is freaking sick. If I actually had a driveway, maybe I would have kept it. I don't own a driveway. Well, not where I live, at least. All right, what else we got here? So I'm just looking at some. Optimus also serves popcorn. Yeah, purposefully. Remember, notice how that's lightweight, right? That's a big deal. Lightweight product, very lightweight product. The box is lightweight. You know, the item inside the box is very lightweight. Uber wins here. Well, that's why Uber is partnering with everyone. Do you have a brother, Kevin? No. They do not refer to the big beautiful bill. They call it the one big bill. That's what they referred to it as. And then somebody's asking me, what's the coupon code? That's right. If you haven't yet taken advantage of the coupon code, go to meetkevin.com. Use coupon code release the files and become a member of the Meet Kevin Alpha Report for life. You get access to all of the courses, the course member live streams, the Alpha Report, the fundamental analysis on real estate, on sales, on stock fundamentals, on trade alerts, you name it. Check it out at meetkevin.com.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.